Cool, cool, cool. We should be broadcasting. Excellent. Let me just monitor things over here. I had it set up and I accidentally closed it. Give me one moment. Just want to monitor it and make sure we're good. Okay. Turn off the audio. Cool. All right, excellent. I am monitoring the live chat. If anyone jumps on or wants to say anything, by all means, please do. Michael Colby saying tick, tick, tick. Yes, we're here. We made it, Michael Colby. We made it. We're alive. Welcome, everyone. We've done this before. Dennis and I, and on the channel here, we have been trying to do more live streams, which is something that we're really trying to ramp up. I don't mean twice a week, but with some regularity, including Dennis and I. We're glad you're here. Any questions at all, please leave them in the chat while we go forward. And Dennis, how are you today, sir?
Doing well. Staying safe from all the fires.
Yeah.
Trying to keep positive and moving forward.
Absolutely. I look forward to tonight. We can talk about the situation in Los Angeles another time, but that is a grave situation, and I'm glad you're safe, sir, to be clear. So tonight we are going to on our topic tonight is something that Dennis calls divide and conquer, which my interpretation of that, or the way I look at that, is what I've called before, like approaching it from chroma and luma. In other words, we're going to talk about how to approach your color, whether it's corrective or creative, and then how to approach luminosity changes, contrast, brightness, shadow recovery, whatever it may be, independently for more control. And Dennis, since this is like your title, I was kind of assuming that you kind of lead in with it, and then I'll jump in and I can share my screen as well. But we're gonna let Dennis kind of intro this so we can talk about it, because depending, regardless of what you call it, regardless of the terminology, to me, it's the only way to go on any edit. So Dennis, let's get you going. Let's get your screen share, or if you want to start just talking, go ahead.
I'll start talking while I set up the screen share.
Okay.
How about we do it that way?
Okay.
So the thing I wanted to talk about today was color correction. Anybody doing any kind of retouching or editing work for images, color correction is a very common thing. We have to do this all the time. And there's lots of tools for it. There's lots of tools we have in Photoshop and Camera Raw and Capture One or whatever like that. They're really powerful. They're getting more powerful all the time. But there's a lot of times where you just have to get down and do the color correction manually.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk about some ways of doing that. And my favorite way of color correcting things is to use curves. It's the most powerful color adjustment tool we have in Photoshop. It's been from day one, or whatever. I've used it over and over again for that. But the problem with curves is that it can be kind of complicated. So today we're going to talk about how to simplify this and make it a lot easier to work with for this. So a lot of this idea, actually, I got to give credit to a longtime mentor, Dan Margulis. He's an old-time color correction expert. I think Dan's based in New Jersey these days. In the 90s and early 2000s, he wrote many books on Photoshop techniques, on retouching, on color correction. He had magazine articles and regular columns on it. He has still has an email list that he maintains about color correction and color adjustment. But I was reading a book that Dan Margulis had written quite some time ago called about the LAB color space, and called The Canyon Conundrum. And he was talking about different ways of adjusting the color for this. And we have two main color models that we use a lot. People are familiar with RGB and CMYK. There's a third one, LAB, which is lightness. And then the color is divided up between A and B. A has green magenta balance in it, and B has blue yellow. And I always remember this for B for blue. But it's based on how our eyes see things. And so the LAB color space can be really powerful. The thing that applies for tonight is when you use a curve adjustment layer in the LAB color space, you get one curve that you can do that's all luminosity, and then you have the other two curves that are only for color. So I was working at a place that did a lot of Photoshop work on movie posters. It was a small design agency. We did a lot of movie posters, and we would have very complex composites. And I was reading this book and thinking, wow, that sounds like a great way to do color correction for this. But my files had to be built in either CMYK or in RGB. I can't be splitting my files off to LAB and bringing them back in or whatever, because it would just not be flexible enough. And this was in the days before smart objects. I think maybe smart objects might have just been coming on the horizon. This was the early mid 2000s. So I was thinking about this LAB color space and thought, what way would there be to do this in RGB? And that's when I hit upon this idea of having two curve adjustment layers, one for luminosity and one for color. Same thing Nino was just saying, luma and chroma, different words for the same things for this. But I want to talk about this and show you about a little bit about this. So here's a shot that's just got bad color for this. I put over here a rainbow colored ramp that I did that I desaturated a little bit just so we can see what happens with the color and all that. And we can see the color on her is a little off for this. So the different ways people would think about normally is like, let's first try a color balance. Where is color balance here? Here's color balance. Let's try color balance here. And let's see, for the mid-tones, maybe we increase the blue a little bit for her mid-tones. Maybe we take some, go for a little bit cyan. So that gets kind of okay. Her shadows are looking kind of funny. It's not too bad, but it's still not quite right for this. But it only gives me limited abilities to adjust things. And I'll show you with another image about how complicated this can be. Part of the thing with the color balance is it's really difficult to adjust brightness and contrast with this for that. So then I would have to bring up another one, brightness and contrast, and then I can turn down contrast. I can boost the brightness or whatever like that. But I've got very clumsy kinds of tools to work with on this. Actually, I'm looking at this. It isn't really bad color I just got here. But that's not really an easy way to go with it. And they're pretty difficult to fine tune and really dial in, because with color balance, we just get shadows, midtones, and highlights. With brightness and contrast, we just get brightness and contrast. So if I want to increase the brightness in the shadows, but keep it down in the highlights, I have to kind of play around with these two things, and I really don't get that level of control.
Yep.
The next thing that people would try would be like, well, let's go to levels. And levels can be really powerful. My friend Lisa Carney, who's a noted retoucher, she says Lisa loves levels, which is really cool. Levels can be really powerful. But again, you've got limited control here. We can increase in this RGB thing, we can change around the exposure. We can change around the contrast and the highlights and the shadows and things. We have different controls. We can play with this. We can go to the red, the green, the blue, but we just get three handles: shadows or black tones, the mid-tones, and the white tones. That's all we get to control with levels. So it's not really giving us the level of control we want. If I go to curves, if I just bring up a curves adjustment layer, and you notice I do all this stuff with adjustment layers because a professional retoucher loves to have flexibility. Rather than applying curves right on this, which is going to lock me in, and if I don't like what I'm doing, anything I'm doing with these adjustment layers, I get to go back and refine. It's a non-destructive workflow. But if I go to my curves adjustment layer, and let's make this a little bit bigger so people have an easier time to see. Can I get, I don't really have a way to make this dialogue bigger, so I hope you guys can see it on here. If I grab this and I brighten it up, I'm brightening up everything in the middle. This is the same thing with levels, is grabbing that middle tone and moving it right or left, making it lighter or darker. I can do something like this where I can play around and lower contrast with this, and I get to fine tune how I'm applying that. I can even kind of bring this in, so it gives me that kind of control, which is kind of cool. But what you'll notice is if I make this a lot darker, the color shifts. It gets darker, redder, more saturated. If I bring this way up here, it gets lighter, but the highlights get more saturated and they shift to yellow. So it's not really easy to go. If I like, oh, you know what? this is a little bit too light. I'm going to do this. Well, now it's too yellow. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take some blue out. I'm going to add some blue into it. Well, now it's too bright. Now I have to come over here. Now I have to turn this down. I'm constantly chasing my tail, running around in circles because everything I adjust affects everything else with it. So it's really difficult to get that dialed in just right.
Oh, yeah.
So the question comes down to what would be an easier way to do this? And that's where we have this idea of the two curve adjustment layers. So I have an action that I do. This is one of the very few actions I have, but this action I have basically just does this. I'm holding down the Option key. I go to curves and I will call this lum curves because I'm a bad typist and I try to cut corners everywhere I can in terms of typing. This one is set for luminosity blending. And then I'm going to make one more. I'm going to call this color curves. And I'm going to set this one to color blended. Okay, so I've got these two curve adjustment layers here. Now, if I come to my luminosity curves and I make her lighter or darker, you see I'm making her lighter or darker, but the color's not shifting at all because whatever I'm doing here is not affecting the color. And we can especially see this in here. We see the brightness of these bands changing, but we don't see any of the saturation or any of the color or whatever for these bands over here shifting at all. So we can kind of brighten her up a little bit, maybe open the shadows up just a little bit, whatever we think is going to be appropriate to do for this. Actually, I don't think this needs a whole lot of adjustment in terms of luminosity. So I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to come over here to color and I'm going to think, what if she looks a little bit too yellow to me? So what if I go and add a little bit of blue? I can use my targeted eyedropper here, target some skin, maybe add just a little bit of blue. And I can come over here and adjust that. And that's not looking too bad. Maybe I want to take some red out of here. So I could try coming over here and take some red out. And pretty easily, we've got her looking not too terribly bad. So that's, the obvious things about how you use this tool. For this, it's basic thing with curves. The other thing with the curves in a color blending mode is what happens if I take the white point and drag it down. So this point up here, on the way I have this set up where black's here and white's here, this is the white point. If I pull the white point down for the RGB curve, you'll notice I'm desaturating my image. This is the same thing as going to the hue saturation adjustment layer and sliding it all the way over to the left, desaturating your image a little bit.
How cool is that? I've never actually done that. Very cool.
Yeah, so here all I need to do is just pull this down a little bit. And it turns out really just saturation was the issue. Just a little bit of saturation, just pull a little saturation out. And that makes it look a whole lot better for this. Now, in this case, it was saturation, but what if I wanted to increase saturation? Well, we know if we come here to luminosity curves, and we know if we, in the RGB thing, we do a standard S curve, this is going to increase our contrast. What happens if we come to the color curves and increase our contrast? We can see here, we're increasing the saturation. We're increasing the saturation here just by adding a little bit of contrast in the RGB curve and color curves adjustment layer. So that's really pretty cool.
That is cool.
If I take the middle point of this and pull it up, we see that we are saturating the shadows a bit, but desaturating the highlights a bit. If I pull this down, we're saturating the highlights, but desaturating the shadows a bit. This starts to give us a lot of stuff we can do. And this is something we can't do very easily with hue saturation or with vibrance, because vibrance will affect colors that are already saturated a lot. Vibrance will leave colors that are oversaturated alone a little bit if you're going to increase them, and it attacks those first when you're decreasing them. And hue saturation just does everything globally for this, but it doesn't really give you an ability to do shadows and highlights a little bit different. So there's a lot of power with this one. I want to show you a little bit about how we put this into practical use. Here's a picture of my daughter from my younger daughter, Katie, when she was I think maybe 6 years old or so. Don't tell her I'm showing this. She hates it. She lives not too far from here. She's now an engineer at Gallo Wines, so she's doing really well.
Oh my.
Doing fantastic. But this is a shot I did of her quite a while ago, and like it's a nice shot of her, but the color's just a little bit off. The luminosity is not too much. I don't want to blow out the highlights here a little more, but it's just the color's a little bit off. So if I come here and I turn on these adjustment layers, I have luminosity here, I have the color here, and what did I do here? I just added a little bit of red, and I just took a little bit of green out. So let's reset this. I'll show you how it works. We come over here to green. I love to use this little target adjustment tool. And I'm going to click on this wall and just pull down. And now you see we're just taking a little bit of green out. Maybe her face is a little too red. So we're going to come over here to red. And we're going to put one here and pull down a little bit. But I don't want to lose too much here. So we're going to put one here. And so it's just a matter of walking the balance. But pretty easily, we wind up getting a much better looking color for this image here.
Nice.
Another idea. This one here is a little more complicated thing. This is a shot of my wife. Before we were engaged, we went up to Lake Tahoe one Thanksgiving weekend for a getaway. And this was shot on film in the old days. So I don't remember what kind of film I shot for this, but this is a shot of her in those days. For
Nice.
that. And this is one of my favorite color correction challenges, because no matter how many times I try to color correct this one, I always go back and like, man, what was I thinking? I got to come back and work it over and over again. In this particular one, the luminosity curve, I wind up brightening this up a little bit. And you see here, this is the quarter tones, or 3/4 tones. I brighten the 3/4 tones, but I pull the shadows down just a little bit to get some contrast in here. So we're brightening her up a little bit, but we're still keeping some contrast in here. But we can see she's still really pretty blue. So this curve here, this one is pretty easy. Again, on the red, I added some red to her, mostly thinking about her skin tones. And then I took some blue out, and the blue is on this point here. So again, this mostly coming in here. I'm thinking about the sweater and trying to get that about right. And then on the RGB, I added just a little bit of a curve to this to add a little bit of saturation in there. Then, of course, you can always mix and add in things. I did another adjustment layer here where this is just a regular curve layer, but it's just affecting her eyes. Then I did another one, which is color curves for her face, because I thought her face was getting too saturated with the adjustment I made, but it was just her face I wanted to adjust. This is another one where I'm just brightening up her face. This is the luminosity curves. And then finally, I'm adding, this one's just set for, this is also luminosity curves. And this one here uses a mask, which is based on the luminosity of the image. So I can open up the shadows on her face a little bit. So you can mix and match, you can add in other things. But the basic idea is that we're using these two curves to get from here to here. Now, as I said, every time I work on this thing, I think to myself, well, this really isn't doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we've talked about this color curve adjustment thing, I also want to throw in another possibility. And I mentioned now that we have so many raw images and all that, one of the things we're first thinking about is going through Lightroom or for Capture One or using Adobe Camera Raw when we're opening this up. So what would happen if we use Adobe Camera Raw for this? So I'm going to double click on the background here, turn this into a layer. Now I'm going to make this a smart object just because I love to work on smart objects for this. It gives me that ability to always go back and readjust and tweak things for that. So I've got the here. I'm going to come up here and go to filter. And here we have Camera Raw filter. So now we can run Camera Raw filter as a filter. It's the same control you get in Lightroom, the exact same controls. But this obviously wasn't shot in RAW, but it gives me that very same powerful tool there. So I'm going to come over here to color. And the eyedropper tool here is really kind of cool. What if I click on here for eyedropper? Like, wow, one click, and this gets much better. Now I can dial in. I can come up here to light. I can open up shadows. on here. I can pull back some of the highlights to get this. I can increase the exposure a little bit. I got a lot of things I can do here, but this also gives you an idea that Adobe Camera Raw can become a much better way to go, especially now that with Adobe Camera Raw, if we come back in here, we have these tools here where it will find people here. And I absolutely love this as a tool. I click on here, it's going to analyze her like facial skin, body skin, eyebrows, eye sclera. We get all these different options here so we can come in and adjust. You want the teeth wider? Let's just make a something for the teeth. Let's turn these off and we're going to get a mask just for the teeth, whatever. So we get lots of different power we have for this.
I've been playing with a Photoshop beta that has that function in it. You know, act not inside Camera Raw, but you know, you can put it right in the layers window, and it's a little clunky, but it was impressive. I can't wait till they finalize that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Here's another image which is a really challenging image. This is from many years ago. I was working on a poster for Transformers, and when Megan Fox was in Transformers. So what was it? Transformers 1 or 2?
That was
That was a
07.
long time ago.
Yeah.
But this is one of the things where this was typical of what we would get when they would give us a TIFF image or a JPEG image when working on movie posters. They didn't necessarily adjust the color just right, and you're just like, this is what you get. You had to figure out how to color correct this thing and get the color to be decent. So this was using the luminosity to adjust this, so brightening it up a lot. And then on the color adjustment, and this was one where it's always really challenging to go. So we take a little bit of red out. The green in the highlights is pushed a little bit, but it's pulled out of the shadows. A little bit of blue is added in as well. When you're color correcting, I really try hard to not have to do red, green, and blue adjustments, because it's like three legs of a stool. If you have a tripod or if you have a three-legged stool and you're trying to get it level and you're cutting all three legs, pretty soon you have a little stump, but you still don't have it flat and level. So you want to try to adjust no more than two at a time. But in this particular case, this one was, you know, really challenging to get dialed in. But this is what we were able to get with it. Now let's take a look at what our Camera Raw thing does. I'm going to turn this into a smart object. I have a hotkey for that. And let's bring up our Camera Raw filter. Camera Raw filter. And we'll go to color. Colors where we have the eyedropper. Let's eyedrop on this. Okay, that's a little too blue. We can come over here to light. Let's open up our exposure a bit. So we can see this one isn't quite falling into place quite so easily with our other stuff. We can pull this around and play around with it a bit. With the eyedropper, what if I click on the eyedropper and I click back here? Oh, that's a little bit better, but we still get some different things we do. So this one's going to be a little more work to play with. When I was playing with it, I also went here, of course. And like first thing I would do is make a mask for the background. And then the background one was easy. Let's just desaturate that one because this should be great. Okay, that one's easy to do. We click here, we can add another mask. We click on add new mask. We come here to select people. And we can come here for the skin, eyebrows. I like to click on all this stuff when I'm working on something for a person. For that, I can have it create seven separate masks, but I'm going to do these all at once in this particular case here. And now let's see what we do for the temperature. I'm going to warm her up just a little bit. Take a little bit of magenta out of her. I have to be really careful. The green magenta balance for skin is the most critical balance of all. Too magenta and we look sunburned.
Yeah.
Too green and we look like we got the flu. So you have to really watch that. It's got to be really, really careful. We can also desaturate the skin a little bit. And then one thing I really like about this is I can also go create a new mask, select people, and now I can click on close, and I can affect the color of her clothes separately. So I can kind of dial in the color of it close a little bit and get a much better result. So it takes a little more work. It's not just a couple of clicks, but you can see that this is actually doing a pretty good job here. We got Megan looking pretty good. It's a little bit better result than what I got going this way. So lots of different tools we have for this.
I like how your
For that.
file is called Transformers Girl. Just get in, get the job done. Who cares? Just
Yeah, well, part of the thing when showing something you use for entertainment, you have to be careful. Like,
yeah,
okay, I can't put a name on it.
yeah.
I can't distribute this file for people to practice around with, but I can use it for demonstrations.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. Speaking of Dan Magoulas, this is a image from one of his books on color correction for this, and again using our two curves method for this. We had this thing. How would you correct this green color cast here? If you're going to color balance water like that, you might get it, but here it's something as simple as come over here. We got the color curve, and we just pull green out of the white. This is our green thing. We just pull the white point of our green down. Because he's looking green, we just wind up pulling green down as magenta to him. And that becomes a really, really easy thing to adjust.
Yep.
For that.
And in color,
are there any questions, people?
We don't have any questions. We have a comment from Michael Colby a while ago. He's just saying kudos to the Mind Your Color version 2, that tool, Mind Your Color, that enables working in lab in an RGB layer instead of having to spin off to a smart layer and work in lab there. So that's true. I've only seen videos about Mind Your Color. I've not actually used it.
I've not heard of that one, so I'm gonna have to check that out.
It's pretty cool.
One of the things that when you're freelancing or when you're working on a commercial project, one of the things you have to keep in mind is your files, your layered files, are going to be shared with a lot of other people down the chain, in the production chain for that. So if you're relying on a plugin they don't have, then they're going to open this up and like, what is this thing? It's not working and I can't work with it.
Yeah.
I've had designers use some special filter to get an effect on some JPEG, and like, I don't have that filter. So you did on the low res JPEG, and I have no clue how to do this on the high res file.
Yeah.
So if the Mind Your Color thing is a special plugin you have to buy, then it could be a little problem if you're working on a project that's going to be shared with other people in the production stream for that. But I will have to check that out because I do love the idea of working in LAB color space for this.
Yeah.
This one last shot here. I think I've got a couple others I can show, but basically just showing the same theme over and over again is because I really wanted to just focus on this divide and conquer technique.
Yeah.
This is a shot from, I studied Kung Fu for many years. For this guy, Larry, is the teacher I studied with for a long time. He's still teaching, still doing a great job. This is my friend, Stan. Stan was the next black belt in the class after I was. Nice. So Stan is now like an internet security expert, I think. Really smart guy. But, at this time, Larry thought taking a lot of pictures during class and posting them on a private website, the students would be able to look at their own pictures and get an idea of how their form looked, and they could self-correct and see, oh, that's what I'm doing. I never realized it. But since we're shooting in a gym and we just have these fluorescent lights, getting the right color was always difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is, kind of typical of what a lot of color correction has to happen. How are we going to color correct this? Well, the divide and conquer two curves. You'll notice that sometimes the luminosity is on top of the colors on the bottom. It doesn't matter which order they're in for that because they're treating separate things here. But here we have a color curve adjustment. And all we did here was take the blue channel, the blue curve, and pull the white point over, and then maybe adjust the shadows a little bit so it didn't get quite so blue here. But this is just taking yellow out of the highlights here. And then for luminosity, this one here, we just brighten it up a little bit so you can see into the shadows a little bit better. So pretty simple adjustment for this. It just takes a little bit of practice, but the more you practice it, the more it becomes, and becomes more second nature here.
Absolutely.
Another thing. Now this one here is one where it gets a bit more complicated because this is also a example image from Dan Margulis. And when Dan Margulis was first talking about it, he was talking about rebuilding the blue channel. If we look at the red, green, we have to come over here and look at this. Red, green, and blue channel. You see the blue channel is like super dark. You're like, oh, we have to put some data into this because this is why it's all gone for that. So that's what this channel mixer was doing, is taking and adding into the blue channel. We're adding a lot of the luminosity from the green and a little bit from, we're adding a bit of the blue in here. We're just trying to get a mix for that to come in here. I think green, we added, green was already left at 100%, and red, yeah, the red was 100%. So it's just blue that we were adjusting for this. So I just pulled it down a little bit from the blue and added in some of the green channel, whatever, for this. And then that got us to a place where it was a little bit closer to do this adjustment for it. But again, like I started to think, what if we use camera raw for this? And camera raw gets us in a pretty close space. Now this is horrible case color. It's going to be hard to get anything out of this thing with such a strong color cast that's going to work. So it's always going to be a task for this. But I just wanted to show that, again, another application for this is Adobe Camera Raw filter. And again, if you do use Adobe Camera Raw, make your layer a smart object. So then this is now an editable file. And I can come over here and I can see, like, oh, look, I adjusted the white point for this. I came here and adjusted the those things for this. Do we have any masks for this? Yes, I have a mask here. The mask is for her skin. And so I'm taking and adjusting the color on her skin a bit here. Another thing that we have in here is a color mixer. And over here, the color mixer gives you ability to target reds, oranges, yellows, greens, aquas, which is cyans, blues, purples, magentas. So here I can look like this looks kind of green in the background. What happens if I turn the saturation on the greens all the way down? So it gives me a lot of control to be very targeted about the adjustments I have. So lots of power with that. I'm not going to keep any of the changes I made for that, but I did want to show you that these different challenges there.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, because if I had a color cast like that, I'd probably just give up.
Yeah. So it's the sort of thing where you're always having to look and try to find different tools you have to bring against it. But the main thing we wanted to share here today was just this luminosity and color curves adjustment, and how easy it can make making a color adjustment for this and dialing it in.
Like what I like about giving classes with you, Dennis, is that I always learn something. So even though I know the core curriculum of what you're going to talk about tonight, there's a couple little details in there. I was like, oh, neat. That's pretty rad. I know for me, like if I put out a saturation adjustment layer, I put it on color blend mode every time. It just gets me a slightly more pleasing saturation boost, I feel. And I've done some tests back and forth. So like if I have a color function, I'm in color blend mode. And if I have a luminosity function, I'm in luminosity blend mode, whether it's contrast or curves or levels or something like that. I've just gotten into that habit. I rarely have one tool doing it all. But that's cool, learning about the couple little minor details on the curves. Let's see here.
One thing people ask sometimes is, what's the difference between color blending and hue blending?
Yeah.
And color has saturation and hue built into it. Hue is just the hue. So you can adjust the hue, but you're not going to be able to get that power where you can adjust saturation.
We have a question from Tony Ravioli saying, what exactly does the channel mixer do? I never understood that tool.
The channel mixer tool, let's come here, and channel mixer tool is an old school tool. And basically what you're doing is you look at, if I look at the red, the green, the blue channels for that, it gives me the ability to kind of mix what these are based on. So for the blue channel, I can put some of the information from the red channel into the blue channel here. So it's sort of an old-fashioned thing. I can even subtract information from something else for this, but it's a way of using the other channels to kind of fill in some of the information here. It's a very old-fashioned kind of tool for that. It's something that I think that one image where had the had this one. I think this is the only one that I can ever remember using it for this. But it was basically just the color on this was so bad, and I looked here at the blue channel, and it was so black. Like, okay, there's obviously no information in here. I got to get information into it. So that was what the approach was for that. But again, it just became a really difficult thing to work with. So
It's funny.
it's not a very common tool.
Yeah.
Don't use it very often anymore, but that is something that's good to know about.
I was gonna say that whenever I play with the channel mixer, and do some extreme stuff, it looks like special effects on photos from 20, 25 years ago, because that's what, that was like a go-to for like cool special effects or weird kind of things. I'm like, oh well, there's a look I haven't seen since 1996. Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
one of the things that's a more modern version of this, I think, I think they were updating the channel mixer is selective color. And selective color can be really powerful because you can adjust the color mix and the tonality for like your blacks, your neutrals, your whites. Then you get reds, yellows, greens, cyans, blues, magentas. So ways of targeting specific colors and adjusting them. But if you're really getting in deep into color correction, it's good to know what tools will allow you to target what kind of color. So if you wanted to, like, you know what, I just need to adjust the color on her top here. What's going to allow me to adjust that? And then you start thinking like, well, let's see. Oh, Camera Raw gives me that kind of masking thing. Maybe selective color would give me the right kind of tone. And you just start to think which things give you the ability to target that specific kind of color.
Yeah, and I will say, like for example, her top there is distinctly a different hue angle than the rest of the shot, right? So, like, if I need to change that outfit color or change something about the outfit, I will target the color in some way before I go for an AI mask, because I notice that those are going to be smoother and quicker. AI masks tend to have fringes of some kind. I mean, I know they're going to get better, and occasionally they hit it out of the park. But if I can see that the hue that I want to target on an outfit or something, or a piece of an element of any kind, if I can target it with color, I'll do that first before I go for an AI mask or a manual mask, which is last resort, but sometimes you have to do it.
Yeah, one variation on that is the hue saturation tool. Hue saturation also gives us an ability to target a specific color range. So her top, let's see, if we come over here to adjust, her top's probably going to be somewhere in the magentas, right? So if we just shift that and shift the hue wildly, oh wow, that's actually doing a really pretty good job of
pretty spot on.
pretty spot on. But the thing I wanted to show you is you have these sliders here, so you can get in and dial in what is being affected by this. So the workflow I do is I'll slam this really wildly one way or the other, just so I'm getting a really wild result. And then I start to play with the way these things are going, so I can see and target just specifically the color. And then when I'm happy with the way I've got this dialed in, these are the feathered edges, and this is areas where it's going to be 100% corrected or affected for this. Then I got to get in and dial in and like, okay, maybe we want to make this, something more like that, and pull saturation down. But this gives us ability. These tools here, these sliders here, give you a lot of ability to target specific colors.
Yeah, and like I said, that kind of approach works. To me, that's my first line of defense before a manual mask, and certainly before an AI mask. If the hue is targetable, when it's targetable, that's what I go for.
and that's the thing you have to look for. In this particular case, it did a great job. We do have a little bit of a feather here,
Yeah,
a little bit of a red thing here, but I don't think that's big enough to affect anything. Sometimes around the hair we might see something.
yeah.
But in this particular case, we got really lucky. I had one of the things with using hue saturation to shift colors and really do a strong shift on a color is that transition between what you're affecting, what you're not affecting, but that you have to be really careful because these borders sometimes are not very kind. And then there's no way you can fix the mask to get that feathered right. So then you're gonna have to go in and paint in something or whatever for it. So I don't use this a lot, but if I have a specific targeted color like this, like you said, any way you can target a color really helps.
Yeah, when it's not targetable, that's where the AI really comes in, or a manual mask with the pen tool or something like that. That's the way we have to do it sometimes. But yeah, no, I love that. And do you do your color shifts and stuff with hue and saturation and color blend mode as well if you use it, or do you leave it in just straight normal?
I don't really use hue saturation an awful lot unless like I'm targeting a specific color.
Sure.
I have practiced so much with my two curve adjustment layers that I'm automatically thinking, go to those.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much you can do.
I can adjust the tonality really easily. I can play around with that and get that dialed in just the way I want. I can affect the saturation and the color really easily and get that dialed in just the way I want. So I'm so fluent with this. The good thing about this is, especially when it's adjustment layer, not only can you come back and play with it over and over again, but everything's visually based. So like, what's this do? Oh, what's this do? Oh, so you don't really have to remember a whole lot about what each thing does because you can get in and play with it and see. And the more you play with it and see, the more your memory starts to build up. So it's just like, anything you practice over and over again, the little voice starts to say in your head, like, oh, I decrease the saturation there, but the shadows need a little more saturation. So let's boost those shadows up a little bit like this. Like, oh, okay. You get a pretty nice looking result.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a killer technique. And the I admit that for me with curves, I use it in luminosity, I use it in color, but with my curves use is fairly limited. I moved into levels like decades ago, and so I tend to do a lot of the same functions with levels, but I like having everything all in the curve and understanding the curve. Like the way you were desaturating, it didn't occur to me to do that, to desaturate on the color blend mode layer. That's super cool, because sometimes that's all you need, just a simple little desat, a couple of tweaks to a channel, and you're done, right? That's super cool.
Yeah, I love that. Like with this, I can desaturate it mostly, but pull some saturation back in the shadows.
Yeah.
I don't know another tool that lets me do this.
Yeah, certainly not that fluid.
Yeah,
that's killer, guys. If anybody, by the way, Tony, thank you for the question. If anyone else has any questions, please let us know. This recording, or will be a recording, will be on the channel indefinitely, so you guys can rewatch it if you're just tuning in. We generally try to keep between 30 and 45 minutes or so. We could talk all night long, I'm sure. But if any has any last second questions or last minute questions, we are open to that. If you have any, let us know. And while you guys are pondering your questions, I will mention that I do believe Mr. Dennison and I are planning another workshop, and it's during a time where I'm going to guess you'll be around, people watching. So what we're planning on doing is we're planning on putting together a retouching workshop of a varying curriculum, but going to be focused on what we do, which is a lot of commercial style retouching, offsite during WPPI this year. Am I right, Dennis?
Yeah. Come March.
Yeah, mid-March. So
tips in person.
Yeah, no, it should be fun. I've done several offsite workshops during WPPI over the years, but always lighting. So this is the first retouching one that I've done offsite at WPPI. Details are coming up. We don't have those quite yet. I know WPPI is March 17th to the 20th. I could be making that up.
Yeah, right around the Ides of March.
The Ides of March.
Be very aware.
Be aware of the Ides of March, yeah. And so we got that coming up. You should definitely check that out. Follow either one of us on social media. Check that out. We have retouching-secrets.com. If you want to go to that will be updated soon. If not in the next day or two with that workshop. We're just trying to finalize it. But I just want to mention that to you guys that we are doing that coming up. Michael Colby said, what happened to the feed? Well, as far as I can tell, it's still going, Michael. I hope it comes back for you. We haven't seen any issues over here, and I'm monitoring it, and I haven't seen it drop. So anyway, Dennis, anything you want to add real quick?
No, no. The only thing I would add is you can check me out on Substack.
That's right.
I have a blog on Substack that I publish articles on pretty regularly. That is under my name, Dennis Dunbar at Substack. So you can find me there. I've got an article coming up tomorrow on painting hair. When we composite a person against a new background, and we make the best mask we can, the edges of the hair always look a little funky. So I was talking about how the pros finesse that and make that look more natural.
And I'll be honest with you, like if I had to self-assess, I would say my hair painting in skills are 2 out of 10. So I'll be reading that one.
But it's a simple concept. Basically, just using a very small brush and a loose arm motion, and sampling a lot of colors, going back, lighter, darker, and then just practicing with it. But
Yeah.
Once you figure out, like, oh, it's something I can paint, I can erase, I can do over again, it becomes easier and easier.
Tony Ravioli says, love your articles, Dennis. Very useful, by the way.
Oh, very good.
I agree. There's always something to learn. I certainly always learn something from this man. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate all of that. And if you guys had...
I love your expertise with shooting and lighting and the way you share the tips with that.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
I've picked up a camera again and got back into shooting a couple years ago, but I haven't ventured into shooting models yet. So I will someday look for your hand holding when I get into that.
Yeah, happy to, my friend. You know this. No problem at all. So guys, if you have any, you can track us down. We're pretty accessible. Find us on social media, say hi. The NBP has a group on Facebook that Dennis is in. We're always in there goofing around, answering questions or whatever you want to do. There's all kinds of resources where you can generally find us and get a hold of us. We don't hide. And we'll be back. Not only are we doing the workshop during offsite NWPPI, but we are also going to be doing more live streams. So stay tuned for that one. We'll announce the topic of the next live stream and the date of the next live stream here. Hopefully this coming week we'll announce the next one. We can probably figure it out, right, Dennis? Another one here soonish.
Yeah, like you said, our goal is to do these more regularly. That's why we're keeping them short and sweet, not trying to do extra long ones. Not asking a lot of people. We just want to share some tips and
Absolutely.
help people out.
Absolutely. And if these get popular enough and it start getting, busy enough and enough people watching, we might just do an open Q&A one night. We've talked about that too. Like, we don't have a topic, just ask questions and we'll open up Photoshop or whatever and start answering questions as best we can. So we might do that as well. So just stay tuned for that. We invite you to please subscribe to all the things, subscribe to Dennis on Substack, subscribe to the MVP channel. No, our live streams are not product promos. It is the NBP channel, but the live streams are going to be educational, photo critique, Q&A. We keep it that way. We have videos on the products if you want to look at that. But stay tuned because we're going to have a lot of stuff coming up. Dennis and I have, like I said, we have other live streams coming up. I have other live streams coming up as well with some other people and some other interviews. We want to make the channel a lot more interactive, which is a long time coming. I've done a lot of interviews. The last batch of interviews I did was in 2020 during the lockdown. And I think I did 40 interviews and it was a lot of fun. I don't necessarily want to ramp it up to that caliber. We want to have more education, not just general interviews with luminaries, though we might have some, but we want to make sure that's as interactive as possible. So your feedback is important is what I'm trying to say. Let us know what you want. Dennis and I will take a look at it, see what we can provide, et cetera, et cetera. Michael Colby, it will be posted for replay. YouTube has some math magic on how long it takes them to get it ready. So once I'm done here, it'll start that process. And hopefully by this, in the middle of the night or something, it'll be ready for replay and all that. So it should be good to go. Dennis, anything else, sir?
No. I hope everybody has a good night, and let us know if there's anything you're interested in learning. As you were saying, Nino, our goal is to share things that people want to learn about. So the more feedback we get, the better we can dial it in and hit the areas you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no topic no topic too simple, too new, and no topic too advanced or too complex. We can talk about everything from basic layers to color science and everything in between. If we have the answer, we're happy to share it.
Exactly.
Okay, well, now that I hear my daughter's dog barking in the backyard, it's probably time to sign off. But thank you again, sir. And please stay safe out there in California, please.
Oh, yes. You two in hurricane land.
We're post-hurricane season. No, I'm lying. We're not. But it doesn't really start again until about July. All right. Anyway, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Again, this will be it'll live on the channel. You can watch it indefinitely anytime you want, and we will see you hopefully next time.